Hello and welcome to another video from the parish of Great Cheshire. My name is John Spence, and today we're going to be looking at the temple, specifically the temple, the second temple, Herod's temple, the Herodian temple, around in the 1st century AD. The Herodian temple was commissioned by Cyrus the Great, according to the book of Ezra, and was started to be built around 538 BC. What we're going to do today is we're going to have a look at that temple, because the New Testament especially talks a lot about the temple, and there's a lot of action that happens in and around the temple, but actually sometimes it's really hard to picture what that would actually look like. What would it feel like to walk around that temple, to be in that vast space with all those people? We're going to have a brief look today at what that would look like through a new program which I've found, which is called the Virtual New Testament. Have a watch of this, and I'll help you talk you through what we're seeing as we go. This is the program, the Virtual New Testament. This is free to download from onto any computer, Mac or Windows. I think it might even work on Linux, to be honest. It will work on pretty much any software you want. This is the city of Jerusalem, and you can see a number of dots, and that will tell you where you can go and what you can look at in Jerusalem. But we're going to look at the temple. The temple's in that top right-hand corner, and it's massive. You can see the scale of the temple compared to the rest of Jerusalem. Here we are in the temple courts, and we're just going to wander over towards the court of the Gentiles. So I want to show you that to start off with. I want to start there and work our way into the temple buildings itself. So as we go, in front of you, what you can see there is the Solomon's Colonnade. Now that's a really interesting place, because that is where people would gather. Now the Solomon's Colonnade goes all the way around the outside. It's a series of columns with a wooden ceiling, and that's where people would gather to talk and to discuss, especially after and before prayers. And now, what we're standing here, what we're looking at, is the court of the Gentiles. Up to that wall just there is the court of the Gentiles. This is where Jesus, in Matthew 21 and Mark 11, where Jesus turned over the tables of the money changers. This is where they would have been. People, this place it was almost a market at that point. So people would have been selling doves and cattle and for people to be able to sacrifice. And the money changers would be there as well, where you change the Roman money to the Jewish money where you could spend in the temple. What you can see there is that wall, and now there's 13 of those little gaps, those gates around the temple, and on the outside of those gates it has a plaque as a message which says something along the lines of, if you're not a Jew, enter at your own risk, you'll be put to death. So when Paul, in Acts 21, when Paul is arrested, one of the reasons he's arrested is they thought he had brought a non-Jew into those temple courts, which was a crime punishable by death. We walk through these doors. There's 3 doors, 3 gates into this court here. This is called the Court of the Women, or the Middle Court. This is if you're a woman in the 1st century, you're allowed to go into this part of the temple, or a Jewish woman, I should say, ritually clean, of course, but you weren't allowed to go any further. In Mark 12, you see a woman putting money into the box, into the treasury as her offering. This is where she would have been. Jesus would have seen her put that money in there, would have been busy with people doing that. And now as we enter through these gates here, this is the court of the men, the court of Israelites. If you're a ritually pure man, you could go up to that brick wall there on that left hand side. But if you're a priest, you can go further. This is the court of the priest. This is where the sacrifices would have happened. This is where the main action of the temple would have been. The hustle and bustle, you can imagine the noise that was going on at this point with the cattle and the doves and the sheep being slaughtered at this point. And up here, this is where the burnt offerings would have been. This is the main altar, the main outside altar, where the priests would have sacrificed the burnt offerings to the Lord for the sins of the people. That bowl down there is where the priests would have been ritually cleaned. They would wash themselves before offering the sacrifices, because there's no point an unclean person offering a sacrifice for another unclean person, you just end up with an unclean sacrifice. So the person offering the sacrifice needs to be ritually clean. Down here, I wanted to show you just these little rooms, you see. So down the back of the temple, around here, only the priest would be able to go around here. You can see little doors, little entrances to the outside courts where the priest could come and go. Little rooms they could use if they weren't on the sacrificing area. On at that point, they could use those areas off the back there. And then as we go up these steps, we go up the steps into the heart of the temple itself. We're going through the curtain now into the sanctuary, and what you have in the sanctuary, this is too quick. This is the sanctuary. This is where the high priest could go. This is the start of the main temple itself, and what you have in here, you have the table of showbread just down there, and then you have the 7 branded candlesticks on the other side, and then you have the altar of incense as well there. Now, I just want to show you something else. Let me just go back to the entrance, because what I want to show you is that big curtain which is standing behind us. I want to give you a really good look at how big that thing was. Oh, too far. Sorry, still getting used to the controls. It's a click button, so you can't use for some reason it doesn't work using the keyboard to move yourself around on this. So it's still great, but so we go through the curtain into the sanctuary again, and there you go. So you can see now that curtain, and that curtain, behind that curtain is where the Holy of Holies would have stood. And when Jesus died on the cross, it talks in the Gospels about the temple curtain being torn in two, and that is that curtain. And in the Holy of Holies is where God's presence would have been. And so when the temple curtain is torn in two, what it's saying is that God's presence is now open to all, not because we deserve it, but because of Jesus' sacrifice on our behalf. He died as a sacrifice, enabling us to access directly to God, not having to go through all those steps, not being stopped by various things, but everyone can access God freely. Previously, only the high priest would have been able to go into that area. Only the high priest would have been able to access the Holy of Holies on once a year basis, on the Day of Atonement, to atone for the sacrifice for the sins of the whole people. Now, where we are here is the Mount of Olives, and we're looking at then the Garden of Gethsemane. You can see how close they were to Jerusalem at that point, and you can see the sheer size of the temple when you're up on that rock. And as we look back towards the temple from the garden, from the Mount of Olives, where Jesus was arrested before he was taken to be executed, you can see that from this position you can see directly down into the temple, directly down into the Holy of Holies, through those curtains, through those main doors. That's really interesting perspective, because you think when Jesus was praying on that final night, he was praying directly down into the heart of the temple. He was praying directly down into God's presence, where God's presence would have dwelt. I'm hoping you found that really helpful. I'm hoping that short tour around that temple, you see something, get a feel for the size of the temple, get a feel for how vast, how busy, and what a hustle and bustle it would have been in that area. And I wanted to read you a verse from Hebrews, because I think hopefully this has been really helpful for your faith as well. Let me just read this verse from Hebrews chapter 4, verse 14. It says this: "Therefore, since we have a great high priest who has gone through the heavens, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith which we profess." I'm hoping that having just had a glimpse of the temple, having had a glimpse of where and what it would have looked like to be in that place when Jesus was around, hopefully that will help you in your faith, to help you, encourage you in your faith, and to hold firm to Jesus, the great high priest, who has enabled us as a people to come to God if we believe and trust in him. I hope that's been helpful for you. If you got any questions, got any comments, please do put them down below and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. If you want to come and learn more about Jesus, then do join us for one of our services on a Sunday, or do get in contact directly with us via our website, which you can find by typing into Google the Parish of Great Chesham, and we'll be able to help you further about learning more about Jesus, this great high priest who enables us access to God. Hopefully that's been helpful, and I'll see you again in another video. Thank you and goodbye.